The BYU football program went back to the well that is Southern Utah University to scoop up another talented offensive lineman to join them in Provo. Let's just put it in terms that you might understand. If Southern Utah University is Drake, well, BYU, they're Kendrick Lamar.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, the motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. We got to talk some more about Monopoly Go. It is the fast-paced game that lets you team up with your friends for tournaments that unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis when you want to just kind of turn tail and taunt your friends as well. So download Monopoly Go now, free on Google Play or on the App Store. And of course, as they like to say, game on. All right, let's talk about BYU football and a big addition to the BYU football program, and big quite literally, in 6'5", 315-pound Southern Utah transfer Austin Leausa as he joins the BYU football program as a transfer in from Southern Utah University. Now, I know traditionally that FCS to FBS or FCS to Power 4 transfers aren't typically going to have you saying, wow, that's a monster pickup for BYU, but let's consider the history of BYU and guys they have brought in from the FCS level. So look no further than just a year ago. Two transfers in from Weber State in both Eddie Heckard as well as now I skipped my mind. Camden Garrett were standout cornerbacks for BYU coming in to join their former head coach in Jay Hill. I think everybody and their dog is excited about Jack Kelly from Weber State joining BYU as a linebacker this year. Mata'ava Ta'ase, most people call him Tava within the BYU football program, joined BYU as a transfer from Southern Utah a year ago as a walk-on, and from Aaron Roderick's own mouth, he joined BYU as their 8th string tight end. By the end of training camp last year, he was the number 2 option behind Isaac Rex. He was that good and that talented that he surpassed every other tight end on the roster not named Isaac Rex and established himself as the number 2. I'll take you back to the very first year, the very first beginnings of Kalani Sitake's tenure for BYU. Remember the names Andrew Idy and Kian Norman? Yeah, those are two guys who were all Big Sky performers at the time for Southern Utah University who came in and established themselves as very key pieces on the first team that Kalani Sitake ever coached at BYU. The history of BYU football under Kalani Sitake's regime has been indelibly linked with transfer players from the FCS level, and in particular in-state players who come in and play an outsized role for BYU. That is why I believe that Austin Leausa, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, by the way, Leausa, yeah, I think we got that right. He comes to BYU as a transfer in, but he's coming closer to home, quite literally. He is a native of Salt Lake County. He went to West Jordan High School. He obviously has had a little bit of an interesting career. Originally a member of the 2017 recruiting class, served a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, then finally began his playing career in 2021, had a short spell after transferring from SUU to Utah State University up in Logan, never actually saw the field for USU in that time, then went back to Southern Utah this past year and was a standout for them in Cedar City, and now comes to BYU, as he says in his own words, with 2 years of eligibility to play for the BYU football program. I think this is a solid pickup for one reason, and it's because this is a guy talking with people at Southern Utah University who they believe was one of, if not their best top to bottom offensive lineman this past year. Now, SUU, they have obviously had some up and down seasons. I think what they have done of late has been a little bit of a track record of showing that they're making positive strides in improving. And the hope is that Austin Leausa comes to BYU and competes for playing time right away, if not a starting job for the BYU football program. Many of you who are everydayers on the podcast will remember we've talked about BYU's O-line. Essentially, it looks like they have essentially 4 4 guys that are kind of locked in as starters right now for BYU, but there's one open slot, and that appears to be at that right guard spot. Can Leausa come in and be that option that BYU needs on the interior of their offensive line? They sure hope so, and he has got the chops, it appears, to be that type of a player for the BYU Cougars. I'll throw up a picture here so you have a better feel for who he is if you're watching this on YouTube. That was from his announcement. He said, a dream come true is what he termed it in terms of his commitment to the BYU football program. Like I said, he's got very good size for the position. He's not an undersized O-lineman coming in here from Southern Utah University. I mentioned 6'5", 315 pounds, has started a lot of games at the FCS level, and that is going to give him an opportunity to come in and compete right away for playing time for TJ Woods and this BYU football program. Would I say that he is the favorite to start at right guard right now for BYU? I think he is one of, if not the favorite to start there, because throughout spring ball, they had a pretty constant rotation to that right guard spot. They had Sonny Mocassini there. Peter Falanico saw some time there. They also slotted in some other guys into that slot to see if they could find the right combination of 5 guys. And it appeared, just based on the rotations in spring camp, they never settled on any one particular guy at that spot. So that should give Leausa an opportunity to come in and compete for playing time right away for the BYU Cougars. Is he going to come in and take the world by storm? That's anybody's guess in all reality. But this is a savvy pickup, because Aaron Roderick said at the end of spring camp they were going to look at the portal for 1 to 2 offensive linemen. And as I have understood it, talking with people connected inside the program, connected to or inside the program, I should clarify there, is that they were going to take 1 interior O-lineman. That was obviously the priority. So the one was to find an interior O-lineman. Well, Austin Leausa fits that bill. And then the second option was for BYU to go out and find a guy at tackle that could come in and challenge Braden Keim and Caleb Etienne, as well as the other tackles on BYU's roster for playing time. So part 1, the priority spot, it appears, has been filled for BYU with Austin Leausa's commitment. Could he come in at 6'5" and challenge for time at tackle? Yeah, I guess in theory he could, but my expectation is he slots inside and plays the guard spot for the Cougars, and they try and find a fellow power level type lineman who's a tackle to come in and play on the ends for the BYU O-line. So I think this is a very, very good pickup for the Cougars. He's going to come in obviously hungry to prove himself. He's taken a leap going from the FCS to the Power 4 level, and he is going to have to obviously prove himself early on in his career to see if he is capable of being the answer for BYU along this offensive line. A couple of people in our Locked On Cougars Insider group expressed concern. What are the concern levels, Jake, that he doesn't mesh with the unit? I think that is absolutely a concern, but I will let you have a little bit more insight on this on tomorrow's podcast, because a guy who potentially could be lining up right alongside Austin Leausa, that is the one, the only, Connor Pay, is going to join us here on this podcast. I'm going to get his thoughts on Austin. I know that they've had some communication since Austin committed to BYU, and I'm sure Connor can explain more about why he is not afraid of adding a guy of this caliber to this unit. I think that TJ Woods alone has completely transformed the mindset of this BYU O-line. It got off the rails a little bit the past 2 years, and yes, I know that there's frustration with that it was not handled sooner, but alas, it is what it is, and the time is now for BYU's O-line to go back and show what they're capable of. I want this O-line to be more like they were in 2020 and 2021. Remember those O-lines, if I recall correctly, both seasons, they were a semifinalist for the Joe Moore Award, which is an award that goes to the best O-line across the board in college football. It's not an individual award. It's a unit award. And I want to see BYU, this offensive line, playing for one another rather than playing as individuals like much of the season last year felt like in many respects with this O-line. So I like this pickup. I think Austin Leausa is going to absolutely be in the mix right away for the Cougars. And the nice part is they are not done yet when it comes to the transfer portal. All right, we will flip over and talk some BYU basketball. Transfer portal is obviously a big part of the conversation as Kevin Young goes about filling out his roster. We finally have word officially of when Keba Keita will be on campus, and it's pretty quick. It's actually today. We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role, my friends. That's why you guys need to check out LinkedIn Jobs. It is a tool to find you the right professionals for your team faster, and more importantly, they do it for free. F-R-E-E. You can't beat that, my friends. LinkedIn is not just a job board. It helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, because even those who aren't actively looking for a job, because they have opportunities to see 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job boards for positions. Think about that. 70% of their users don't go to other job boards. That's the place you want to look. 86% of small businesses are getting qualified candidates within 24 hours of their jobs posting on LinkedIn Jobs. Hire professionals like a professional and do it with our friends on LinkedIn. They know that small businesses are wearing so many different hats and might not have the adequate time or resources to hire, so they want to make it as simple as possible and help you guys out. So post your job for free today at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post that job for free. Once again, terms and conditions apply. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN and sick of all the screaming seemingly going on all the time on those channels? Well, make the switch to Locked On Sports today, my friends. Is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel that's on YouTube. And this part is programmed for you every single day, bringing you the biggest stories of all the screaming going on the other networks. It's Locked On Sports Today. It brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the Amazon Free Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. All right, let's talk about BYU basketball. I got to give major props to Robbie McCombs from Vanquish the Foe. He continues to absolutely kill it when it comes to reporting on what's going on for the BYU basketball program. And as he points out in a recent article he posted yesterday, Sunday, Keba Keita is on campus, or expected to be on campus today for his official visit to BYU. I said it last week that Keba was going to have a number of options in the transfer portal because big men are coming at a premium. They're similar to quarterbacks when it comes to the football realm. There's not enough of them to go around, and the demand for them is at an all-time high. So BYU is going to be competing with a number of programs for Keba's commitment. But I think that the connection between Chris Burgess and obviously him not having to go too far away from where he's been comfortable, having played at both Wasatch Academy and at the University of Utah, Keba absolutely should be considered a favorite, or BYU should be considered a favorite to land Keba Keita out of the portal. I know a number of you have concerned him being 6'8", not being the ideal or the perfect center for this BYU basketball program. But one thing that Robbie points out, and one thing that I've been talking with people about, is that Keba Keita is a different type player than his fellow countryman, Mfuseni Traore. Remember, Fus is a guy you toss the ball into on the low block and let him go to work. That is not Keba Keita's game. Those of you who have watched Keba play at Utah know that he is a rim runner. He goes to the rim. So pick and roll action that BYU probably will feature prominently under new head coach Kevin Young. This is an ideal fit for him. And at 6'8", he's kind of more in the mold of the modern day positionless basketball big man. And what I mean by that is, yeah, he doesn't have the ideal length or the height you want at 6'8", but he's got a 7'4" wingspan, and he plays bigger than his frame. And I know we've said that a lot about Fuseni Traore. We've seen Fus get bottled up at times, and it's been a criticism that I've levied myself about BYU not having the height. But based on how the portal is kind of shaking out right now, Keba Keita might be the best option for BYU to land in terms of a big man, and just to make do with what you got right now. Can you find somebody else in the portal that there's still that possibility that Kevin Young pulls that proverbial rabbit out of his hat and finds another 6'11", 7-foot big man that is exactly what BYU needs? That's always a possibility, but it appears that Keba Keita right now, as of recording of this podcast, is probably the best and most likely option for BYU to be their starting five-man this season. And I'm very high on Keba's ability because he's an absolute machine. He just looks like the Terminator out there. And any of you who watched that BYU and Utah basketball game last year, remember how dominant Utah's bigs were in that game. Well, Keba Keita was absolutely right there with that. So I think this would be a very savvy pickup. Now, I'm very excited to hear this as well from the report that Robbie put out. Chaz Lanier. Now, that might not sound familiar to you, but this is a guy who was one of the top and premier transfer portal targets Wildcats that is still available right now. This is a guy who played at North Florida this past year and has incredible shooting numbers and appears to have a potential NBA career in his future, and that's why Kevin Young obviously would get in the mix here. He is, as mentioned in this article, Kevin Young has shown Lanier that what he did with Devin Booker envisions Lanier having that type of role with BYU. Can you imagine what a guy getting on a Zoom call with a guy like Chaz Lanier and saying, hey, oh, by the way, when I was working with the Phoenix Suns, I worked with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and I helped Devin Booker become what he is. I want to do that same thing with you here at the collegiate level and then get you to that next level where you can play in the NBA. That's a pretty compelling pitch. And if they can get Chaz Lanier, folks, Chaz Lanier would essentially, I think, absolve all concerns about BYU's wing scoring potential issues next year, because he has got all of the goods. His shooting numbers, he's got good size at the guard spot to play on the wing. I think that would be a monster pickup for BYU to get him. But the bigger point to be made here, just talking about this, and he also, speaking of Robbie, also talks about a couple other prospects. I'd encourage you guys to go read it over at vanquishthefoe.com. The bigger point to be made here is that Kevin Young is having an absolutely incredible impact. Chaz Lanier, no offense to what Mark Pope was doing, because Mark Pope did some very, very good things in the transfer portal, but Mark Pope was never going to get Chaz Lanier to potentially visit with him, A, via Zoom call, and B, make an official visit to BYU. I can also tell you this, based on what I understand, Keba Keita and Mark Pope, that was not going to work either. I don't know what the issues were or are there, but Keba Keita is a guy that appears to be Chris Burgess is the guy that's going to lock him down if he does decide to come to BYU. And the way that Kevin Young is going about this is he's being very smart about kind of picking his spots and when he goes after guys and when he drops that NBA card. I think any player of any renown who pays attention to like literally anybody when it comes to their future in the NBA would be floored to have a guy like Kevin Young say, hey, by the way, I worked with this guy. So let's say for Keba Keita's sake, he can go to him and say, okay, in my offense, the offenses that I've coordinated in the NBA, I've had guys like Joel Embiid running things for us in the low block. Why can't you come in and develop like he did and be that type of player for us? I think for a guy like Chaz Lanier, he points to the Devin Booker thing and says, Devin Booker is what he is because I was a big part of his development as an NBA player. He's an all-star, a perennial all-star now in the NBA. I did that. I helped him do that along the way. I can help you do that as well. If BYU gets Keba Keita and Chaz Lanier, that would be two monster pickups for this BYU roster, which, by the way, the roster is not broken by any means. Getting Dallin Hall back, getting Richie Saunders back. Yes, losing Ali Khalifa hurts, but that was a different style that BYU is playing with that I don't think Kevin Young was going to favor with a guy like Ali Khalifa. And you wish Ali nothing but the best as he goes to Louisville, and I'm sure that he'll want nothing more than to stick one to his former head coach, Mark Pope, when the Cardinals and the Kentucky Wildcats get together next season. But the bigger point to be made here is that Kevin Young has absolutely been dynamite in his early run here with the BYU basketball program. And if he can add Keba Keita to his front court and he brings more of a positionless basketball type system to BYU, which this roster is not it's not unfamiliar with. Dax, remember what they were running last year for BYU. It was a lot of positionless type basketball. Dallin Hall would run the offense when he was on the court, but they also would have guys like Jackson Robinson from his wing position and Ali Khalifa as a point center run things as well. They are not wholly unfamiliar with positionless type basketball, but I think that the BYU mindset here under Kevin Young is we are trying to find the best talent possible that we can find to add to what is already a very strong roster, and let's just run it back and see if we can rise even higher. Now, let's also acknowledge the proverbial elephant or elephants in the room is that Houston and Baylor and the Big 12, folks, it is an absolutely insane league. There were some tweets last night, I'm see if I can find it real quick as I'm recording this, talking about what BYU is getting into when it comes to playing in this league they're playing in. It's just absolutely nuts. Okay, if I can find this here, man, I had it for a moment and I clicked out of it before I started recording. Should have held it up. But nonetheless, the bigger point to be made here is that the Big 12 is going to be very, very strong once again next season. It was the top-rated league in KenPom.com this past year, and for good reason, because it was just an absolute bear trap. And BYU finished 5th. BYU has lost a little bit from that roster a year ago. Obviously, Jackson Robinson, Ali Khalifa, Spencer Johnson, they're all out of the program currently. It's not ruled out completely that Jackson couldn't come back to BYU, but it's a very strong roster already, and now you have potential to add a guy like Keba Keita and or this Chaz Lanier character to BYU's roster. That would be an absolute home run, and yet just add another kind of feather in the cap of Kevin Young doing what he's been doing early on for this BYU basketball program. It's an exciting time if you're a BYU Hoops fan to watch what Kevin Young is building here, and if you're not on the bandwagon already, I would encourage you to get on it. Now, obviously, you have to add the caveat that there's going to be a lot of work to be done, and obviously there's going to be a lot to be proven on the court because the Big 12, as I mentioned, is going to be very, very strong once again next season. And oh, by the way, you're going from 18 league games this past year. Next year, you get 20 league games, and by the way, it's a 16-team league, which adds the likes of Colorado and Arizona to the mix. Yeah, it's going to be tough, and it's absolutely going to be rugged. But Kevin Young, he didn't sign up for this thinking that I'm going to be middle of the table. He looked at BYU's roster and probably said, you know what? They finished fifth with what they got there. I can add some pieces to that, and we can push them even higher than that. Could BYU finish in the top 4 of the Big 12 next year? If they finish in the top 4 of the Big 12 next year, that's a 2, 3, maybe a 1 seed, in all honesty. Is that good of a league, and the top-end talent of the league is going to require you to play at an extremely high level, and that's what BYU is aspiring to do this year. They made believers out of all of us last year, picked 13th in the preseason poll, finishing 5th and getting a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. It was an absolutely incredible season. Now can you push that just a little bit higher? And based on how BYU is recruiting right now, there's no reason to think that they can't do that. And oh, by the way, you had guys like Brody Kozlowski coming in as a freshman who's a sharp-shooting modern-day 4. Man, there's a lot to be excited about if you're a Cougar fan looking at this roster, because it's really shaping into one that could challenge for supremacy in the Big 12, and that's an exciting prospect to consider. But you do obviously have to shore up that front court. And if Keba Keita is that answer and he's the only guy, great. But if you can find another guy beyond him who's 6'11", 7 foot, who can be that true rim protector for you, even better. And we'll see how things continue to shake out. But it appears that BYU, they continue to do no wrong, seemingly, under Kevin Young as KYU at BYU rolls on here in Provo. All right, we'll finish up today's show with a couple of thoughts on summer portal visits upcoming for the BYU football program, as well as a couple of notes. A former transfer from BYU visiting a team that BYU played as recently as a year ago. We'll also talk about an interesting story out of Kansas State involving the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a guy going on a mission in the middle of his career playing college football. We'll get into all that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Monopoly Go. All right, game off for a minute here, my friends. We're going to pause and talk about our friends at Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. We're sick of you talking about this, Jake, but the best part is there's too much good stuff in this game that I cannot take this opportunity and not talk to you about it. You can team up with your friends at Monopoly Go for time tournaments where you work together and build up each other's boards. The best part is the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. There's so much more to get, like a unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete your albums or big prizes, cool new playing pieces to have fun on all the different boards with, and also hilarious emojis for taunting your friends when you smash their buildings and heist their vaults when you turn tail on them and become the heel. That's the best part about it. Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every single day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. There's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies to go along with it. There's always something new to fun discovered in Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Once again, that's free now on the Google Play or the App Store. And as they like to say, it's time to game on. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. I want to thank you guys and say I appreciate all of you who have signed up to join our Locked On Cougars Insider group this past weekend. We are nearing the 100 subscriber mark on that, and what it is, it's a great way to get updates from me directly to your phone. They come in the form of a text message. You fire back with your thoughts. I see them instantly on my end as well. It's a great way to interact with the show and also supports the show as well. You get a free 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you, and just $4.99 a month after that. And the best part is, if you guys want to ask questions to Connor Pay on tomorrow's podcast, the only people who are going to get access to do that are members of our Locked On Cougars Insider group. So if you want the inside intel that I've got for you guys, join Locked On Cougars, our Insider group. Click the show link in the notes below, whether you're watching and or listening to this, and you guys can check it out and join us over at our Locked On Cougars Insider group. once again. All right, couple of notes before we go on today's show include that Danny Saili, the former BYU defensive tackle, he is, according to what is being reported out of Arkansas yesterday, Whole Hog Sports, powered by Hogs Illustrated, is reporting that former BYU defensive lineman Danny Saili is visiting Arkansas this weekend, or this past weekend, to see if it's the right option for him. The more I hear about Danny Saili, I do believe it is a loss for BYU, and the more I talk to people, it was a bit of a surprise that he left BYU, but he made his choice, and he obviously has to move on with what he's going to do, and BYU also has to move on now and try and make do with what they've got. Danny Saili was going to be in the two deep for BYU on that defensive line, if not an outright starter, and was expected to be a very, very strong contributor for BYU at defensive tackle. And it's no doubt that he's a loss, but we'll see if he ultimately lands at Arkansas, and hopefully his run at Arkansas lasts more than 4 months, unlike it was at BYU. Now, another crazy note includes out of Kansas State. Now, this is a Big 12 compatriot of BYU's and also an opponent this season. Well, their potential starting middle linebacker this year, Jake Clifton, who has played 19 career games, if I recall correctly, for Kansas State across the last 2 seasons, announced on Friday that he is going to put his career on pause as he is going on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Now, this is a crazy story, and trust me, I had a number of you ask me about it. Well, Jake, why didn't BYU recruit this kid, or did they recruit this kid out of high school? Everything I understand about Jake Clifton is he actually joined the church when he got to Kansas State, or shortly before he enrolled there, and really had no connection to BYU in the lead up to that. He has played the last 2 seasons as a solid contributor for Kansas State. I think was it 19 games, if I recall correctly? Let's see, he has 19 solo tackles in his career, had a career high 8 tackles in a loss to Texas this past year. He played the opening 8 games with 3 starts at middle linebacker before his season got cut short this past year for Kansas State. 11 games as a true freshman, and so 19 career games. I was right, okay. But nonetheless, crazy story. This guy's going on a mission, and there was no indication from him. I'm assuming that he would go back and play at Kansas State after he puts on his badge and tie for BYU, not for BYU, for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But hey, maybe he goes on a mission, decides he wants to come play at BYU. They could use a guy of his caliber, I would imagine. He's a very talented player, no doubt, because that Kansas State defense, they're no joke. And it's kind of crazy that in some ways, Kansas State got weaker this weekend, whereas the Lord's Army, as we like to call it for the Church of Jesus Christ, got a little bit stronger with Jake Clifton going on a mission. And I just want to say an early congratulations to Elder Clifton as he moves on with his what he's going to do in his life. That's kind of crazy to consider. 2 years into a college career to put it on pause. That takes a lot of stones, but congratulations to him and best of luck to him as he moves forward now. All right, and the final thing on today's podcast is get ready, folks. Summer official visit season is a thing now in college football, and a number of you are thinking, why in the world are guys doing this? Well, a lot of guys, when it comes to their recruiting, want to make their decision before their senior year of high school football gets overshadowed with so many visits and all that type of stuff that seems to happen during the fall. Well, BYU is joining a large list of schools out there. They're going to be entertaining a number of guys on visits. The first one coming up in just 2 weeks' time is Aaron Dunn, local prospect out of Spanish Fork High School. He's got offers all over the country, a 4-star offensive lineman. He will also make visits to UCLA, USC, Utah, and Oregon this summer. Be great to have him come to Provo, and BYU a very good opportunity early on May 17th to have him out. He's making a visit this weekend to UCLA. Then he's going to follow that up with visits to SC, Utah, and Oregon going into June. Then there's also guys like LaMason Waller, Manny Fuller, Kalepe Vete, Blake Bryce, Tyler Payne, who's already committed to the BYU football program. Same with Blake Bryce. Those are actually the 2 of the commits in BYU's 2025 class. They have announced via social media they're going to be making visits in June to BYU, speaking of these players. And the thing about this is crazy to look at, is that now the months of May and June are now official visit season. Now, I will also add this. It's a great time to visit Provo, honestly. I know that the weather here in Utah has not been good the last couple of days. Let's be real. We usually avoid this type of stuff when it comes to May, but We often talk about official visits coming in the final weeks of the recruiting the recruiting calendar in the months of December and January, and BYU is traditionally taking those guys out to do snowmobiling and sell BYU and say, hey, it's great here in the summer. You look at all this snow for some of you who have never seen snow before, but it's great in the summer. Well, you get them here in May and June. Well, guess what? That's when it's at its absolute best. That's when it's like, okay, this is exactly what BYU's all about. So get ready for it. It's going to become a bigger part of the recruiting calendar to see guys going on these official visits during the summer, and BYU have to put their best foot forward. I know that BYU would like to have these guys in to visit when they have games going on, whether that's football and basketball, but at this point in a lot of these guys' career, if they've been being recruited by BYU to any level, they've probably already visited a number of times and have seen the environments that both Lavelle Edwards Stadium and the Marriott Center have for them, and they obviously already have an idea of that. Now it's more about coming to Provo, getting a real feel of what BYU has in mind for them, meeting with professors and other administrators on upper campus when it comes to the academic side of things, and just get a feel of, is this a place where I can be for the next 3, 4, 5 years, or in case of guys that serve a mission, 7 years maybe? Is this a place I want to be? And that's a big part of it, and we'll see how BYU does with it. But get ready. It's going to be, we'll be chronicling these more as they kind of come up. We'll talk about Aaron Dunn as well as kind of the first one, but as each one of these official visits come, we'll get a better look at each one of these young men, and we'll have that covered for you guys right here on the podcast. All right. That's what I got for you guys on this Monday. So big thank you, as always, for your support of the podcast. Cannot thank you guys enough for continuing to be with us every single day. The more I meet people and talk to people about this podcast, it's why I keep doing it. I've had a number of people ask me, well, how do you avoid getting burned out, Jake? Well, it's frankly because of y'all out there. When there are days that I'm like, man, I don't really have anything in mind for a podcast, you know what I can rely on? I can go to our Locked On Cougars Insider group and say, hey, I want to do a mailbag. What questions you got for me now? And they lob me, it feels like 10, 20 questions, and every one of them could be an entire show of their own. So thank you, truthfully, for all of the support. You guys make it worth it every single day to do this, and I cannot thank you guys enough for being a part of it. So once again, as I like to say, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Obviously, a big thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us here as well. And until tomorrow when we talk with Connor Pay, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.